Dear students, welcome to our science episode. Today we are going to discuss the main principles of heredity. The main principles of heredity. What are hereditary traits? They are the traits that are transmitted from one generation to another. Examples: hair color, skin color, number of fingers, and blood groups. What about acquired traits? They are the traits that aren't transmitted from one generation to another. Instead, they are acquired. Examples: the skill of playing football or writing. How are hereditary traits transmitted from one generation to another? They are transferred from one generation to another through the process of reproduction. And this process is governed by basics and laws. The branch of science that studies these laws is called genetics. So what is genetics? Genetics is the science that researches the transmission of hereditary traits from one generation to another by studying the similarities and the differences between the parents and the offspring. We have two types of reproduction: asexual reproduction, where a single-celled living organism, this living organism is only one cell, like for example yeast or amoeba. They produce new offspring by cell division. This is called asexual reproduction. The end result will be two daughter cells. These cells are identical or similar to the parent. The other type is the sexual reproduction. This occurs in most higher living organisms, as plants and animals, when two parents, one of them is a male and the other is a female. These parents will produce reproductive cells. These reproductive cells will unite together or combine to form an offspring. This offspring will not be 100% similar to the parents. There are similarities and there are also differences. It means they are not 100% identical. They are somewhat different. This is the sexual reproduction. Two parents and an offspring that is not 100% similar to the parents. Let's remember together the pollination of plants. Plants are pollinated either by self-pollination, and this happens at the same flower, where the pollens are transferred from the male part of the flower to the female part of the same flower. That's why we call it self-pollination. And we have another type called cross-pollination. The cross-pollination occurs between two flowers, where a pollinator or an insect can transfer the pollens from one flower to another. It's called cross-pollination. Who is the first founder of heredity? Yes, the scientist Gregor Mendel. He performed his experiments using pea plants in the garden of the monastery at Brunn. He carried out a group of experiments that explained how the hereditary traits we talked about are transmitted from one generation to another, why some traits of parents appear in their offspring, now, why did Mendel prefer using pea plant in performing his experiments? It is easy to be planted and it grows fast. This is the pea plant. Gregor Mendel used this pea plant to study genetics. Why? Why he chose pea plants? Because it's easy to be planted and it grows fast. Its life cycle is too short, Its flowers are hermaphrodite, so it can be self-pollinated. The flowers are hermaphrodite means they carry the male and the female parts in the same flower, so they can be self-pollinated. Number 4, it can be easily artificially pollinated by humans. And it produces large number of plants in a generation. It also has several pairs of easily organized contrasting traits. The traits in the pea plants are easy to study. He conducted his experiments and he decided to choose 7 traits to study. The seed shape, whether the seed is round or wrinkled, the seed color, whether the seed is yellow or green, the pod shape, inflated or constricted, the pod color, green or yellow, the flower color, purple or white, the flower location, if it is axial or terminal, and the plant size, whether it is tall or short. Let's remember together the different parts of a flower. The colored part is called the petal. The green leaves are called sepals. This is the female part of the flower. It's called the pistil. Stigma on the top, a style, and then the ovary containing the ovule, which will become a seed in the future. This is the male part of the flower. This is also a male part. This one too. The male part consists of an anther at the top with a filament. Both of them are called stamen. In his first experiment, Mendel chose a pea plant that produces yellow seeds. He chose a pea plant producing yellow seeds and another one producing green seeds for several generations. He made self-pollination for these plants to ensure the purity of the trait. And then he planted the seeds of these plants. When the flowers appeared, he removed the stamens. He removed the male part, which contains the pollen grains before the anther become mature to ensure that the plant doesn't self-pollinate. So he prevented the self-pollination of the plant, and he decided to pollinate the plants by himself. Mendel made cross-pollination for flowers of yellow seed plants with pollen grains from green seed plants, and flowers of green seed plants with pollen grains from yellow seed plants. He wanted to mix. He covered the stigmas of the pistil, the female part of the flower, to prevent the cross-pollination from other flowers. So he protected his plant and his experiment. Then he planted the produced seeds. He observed that all the seeds of the first generation plants were all of them yellow, and the green colored disappeared. Mendel led the first generation to self-pollinate. He gave the chance for the first generation to self-pollinate, and then he planted the resulting seeds. In the second generation, quarter was green. Only quarter of the second generation plant was green, and 3/4 were yellow, were having yellow seeds. Mendel repeated the same experiment on the 7 traits of the pea plant and got the same result. The conclusion: one of the 2 traits appeared in all offspring of the first generation. So, if we will see together the first generation, only the yellow trait appeared. This means that this trait is dominant, is strong. The other trait disappeared in the first generation, which is the green color. The green color seeds disappeared in the first generation. And this means that this trait is recessive, weak. So let's talk about the principle of complete dominance, which is the appearance of a dominant hereditary trait in the individuals of the first generation. When two individuals are crossed together, one of them carries a pure trait contrasting the trait carried by the other individual. In living organisms, each hereditary trait is controlled by two genes, as you can see here, one from the father and one from the mother. The genes are similar or homozygous if the trait is pure, and the genes are different or heterozygous if the trait is impure or hybrid. Look at this picture. These traits are homozygous. They are pure traits. And these traits are heterozygous or impure or hybrid traits. If the letter is capital, so this means that the trait is dominant. And if the letter is small, so the trait is recessive. The two genes separate when the gametes are formed in the process of meiosis, where each gamete receives one gene for each hereditary trait. Let's see together. This is the process of meiosis. In the process of meiosis, two genes will separate to form the gametes. And the gametes, or what we call the reproductive cells, the egg or the sperm, are called gametes. How these gametes receive genes? By segregation or by separation during the meiosis process. In the meiosis process, there is separation of genes to form gametes. Therefore, the color of seed depends on genes carried by the gametes. When the gametes are produced by meiosis, these genes separate or segregate from each other. When the gametes carrying the yellow color gene meet the gametes carrying the green gene, the yellow gene dominates, producing only yellow color seeds in the first generation. Let's see together. These are the parents. One of them is carrying dominant gene for the yellow color. If the symbol or if the alphabet is capital letter, so this means dominant. And of course it's pure, so it's pure dominant color. The other parent is carrying two genes, and we wrote them small, not capital, because they are recessive, and they are pure also. They are pure green. So pure yellow, pure green. Which is dominant? The yellow, the stronger. And which is recessive? The weaker, the green. So when they were cross-pollinated, first of all, before cross-pollination, there is the formation of gametes during the meiosis. So they separate, as you can see. The genes are separated from each other. They segregate. So each gamete will receive only one gene. During the cross-pollination, the first generation, the offspring of the first generation, will be all of them yellow, with the Y, the dominant, and the YG. Y is yellow and G for the green. Y capital letter. So all of the resulting offspring will have yellow color, and they are dominant and they are hybrid. Why hybrid? Because heterozygous. They are not pure. Why? They have the Y for the yellow gene, and they have the G for the green gene. Pure yellow plus pure green equal hybrid yellow. When the gametes of the first generation meet, the recessive trait will appear again in the second generation. So look at this picture. Now the first generation become the parent. YG, we have YG and YG, yellow, green, and they are dominant but hybrid. They are not pure. And then the process of meiosis and formation of gametes, segregation of genes. The genes are going to separate from each other, with each gamete receiving one gene only. When they will pollinate, they will produce the offspring of the second generation. Third quarter of them are going to be yellow. One dominant pure, two dominant and hybrid. And 1/4 of the offspring in the second generation will carry the green seed color. It's a recessive gene, G small, and pure at the same time. So this means that hybrid yellow, this one plus hybrid yellow, will get at the end 3 yellow and 1 green. Now we come to Mendel's first law, or the law of segregation. When two individuals of any pair or hereditary traits are different from each other, only the dominant trait appears in the first generation, while the two traits appear in the second generation in a ratio 3 dominant to 1 recessive. Pure individual is the individual who carries a similar pair of genes, either dominant or recessive. Yes, like the 2 capital R or the 2 capital R small, R capital or R small. They are pure individuals. And what about the hybrid individual? This is the individual who carries a different pair of genes, one dominant and the other recessive. So this one is hybrid or heterozygous. This one is hybrid or heterozygous. This one is pure or homozygous. This one is pure or homozygous. Time for questions. Okay. If crossing takes place between two pea plants, one of them is of hybrid green fruits. This is the genotype, G capital, G small. And the other is of yellow fruits, 2G small, 2 small g. Explain on the basis of genetics or genetic principles the results of such crossing and mention the ratio of the produced offspring. My advice to you is to draw this table and put the genes around the table. So one of them is having the G capital, the G small. The other one, the pea plant of the yellow flower, 2 recessive traits or 2 recessive genes, G small, G small. Then cross them. So G capital, G small, G capital, G small, G small, G small, G small, G small. What can you see here? If it is capital, so it's dominant. So this is the stronger trait, green color. And 2 of them small, so the recessive trait, the yellow fruit. So 50% of the fruits will be green and 50% will be yellow. Dear students, thank you for watching and waiting for you in other episodes.